Hello, people. This is Zyberpunky and friends, and today Shinja and Officer Dan are joining me in this interesting topic, and it is next gen gaming. All right, so there is, or well, for the past few weeks, so we've been listening to the new update for Sony's latest console, the PlayStation 4, with the new features and whatnot, and we also have the PlayStation 4.5. Now, this is before we get to 4.5. I've been pretty. I do not have the PlayStation 4 yet, like most all of you know that. So, so Shinja, what can you tell me about this new update and its new features that the Sony PlayStation 4 has right now?
What updates the 4.5 has? Is that what you're
No,
asking?
the actual console.
Oh, like what differences it has from previous consoles?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the biggest differences are the processors and the graphics cards in it. It can actually handle way more items spawning into into your game, so developers can make ridiculously complicated levels with like tons and tons of like people, and your system won't crash, and it'll also load them in pretty quickly without lag. Um, you also have dynamic features such as like dynamic fire, dynamic water, and some other things, which was normally only exclusive to PC before, but now it's
Yeah,
available to consoles. Uh, and what they pushed a lot when they were trying to sell the PS4 was that the ability to share everything you do on your PS4 as if it was like being in your own living room. So there's the recording feature that it records every 15 minutes or the last 15 minutes of your gameplay. You can take pictures of it. You can connect to Facebook and share what you're doing with people, or you can connect it to Twitch and YouTube and stream it to people, or you can stream it to someone else's PS4 and let them see what you're doing, or even pass off the controller to them, which is something that's never really been seen before. Um, and Yeah, it was pretty much breaking, like groundbreaking at the time, um, and it kind of still is. And they're implementing new stuff like letting you to stream your PlayStation to any other device. Recently, they just added the support to stream to your MacBook or Apple
yeah.
products, or even to your Windows computers, PCs. You could already do it on your PlayStation TV if you had one, and also on your PS Vitas. Anything with the label Sony on it really could do it. And if you had the PlayStation app, you could also use that as well. So yeah, they're just really pushing the whole sharing thing
Oh yes.
as much as you can and making it accessible on any platform or whatever. So PlayStation 4 is the closest thing that we've ever gotten to an actual PC. It basically is a PC.
It's a PC, yes. So, we all know that Shinja and I are very hardcore fans of Sony, but we also have a fan of Nintendo here, which is Officer Dan.
Hmm.
And Officer Dan, what can you tell me about, or tell the audience about, uh, a little bit of the history of Nintendo and how it did, progress within time and this eighth generation console?
I could go back pretty far, but you're just wanting me to cover the latest, pretty much. Is that what you're asking?
Well, just tell us a little bit more about the history, and then we go to the actual thing.
Oh, sure. When Nintendo came out in full force was the lowest point that video games had ever been up at that point, and so Super Mario Brothers. Many people might go ahead and tell you that Super Mario Brothers single-handedly pulled the economy for video games up out of the garbage and the
Yeah,
heap that it was in. Atari dug themselves pretty deep with stuff, and everybody like it's fun to blame the infamous E.T. Atari game that sent it into the crash and all
that was shit.
Yeah, it sure is.
And people are paying nearly thousands for it now.
It's fun to pin that on that for how terrible it is. The 6-week development time. That's fun, and so it was it was in the dumps, and then Nintendo debuts with their first home console, really, in the sense that we know, as in you have a box that connects to your TV and goes in your living room. Yep. And stuff like that, and so it was. It did okay, really good, above average sales for the Famicom, as it was called in Japan, and so it wasn't a huge smash hit or anything, because video games were still. They're always Japan's technologically ahead of the curve, so arcades are big, and so video games were. Still present, but for us to have a box at home was still pretty novel. And the NES came out here a year or two later, and it was a huge giant hit. Similar to how the Wii even was in recent years, where it was hard to get one. Like, they just didn't expect the kind of explosion that it was, and so it was Super Mario Brothers that for how that game controlled, and the technology behind that, to have a key piece of technology in that is like scrolling, and there's a lot of stuff that was pinned to one screen, and so the physics and that combined with the power that it had, I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but that's the base history of it. Fast forwarding to where we are today, the Wii U is not selling how they expected it to go. Nintendo, everybody loves to say doom and gloom Nintendo, and I've heard that for 10 years, and they do just fine. It's going to be a very long time before Nintendo has to worry about money. It's an exciting speculative time. Everybody wants to discuss rumors of the codenamed, I should add, it's codenamed NX, and this E3 is very prime territory for us to finally have a reveal on that of some sort. The reason why people like to talk about the NX and speculate it as much as they have is because the president of Nintendo America just decided to just name drop and say, hey, we're working on something new last year. And it was just casual. It was really just casual. But people are just super hungry for news. So it's still all the talk, even though we know next to nothing about it. But and what he did say for that E3 last year is that we would be seeing more of it this year. And I could ramble about that as well.
Awesome. So in terms of hardware that the Wii U is been having in the 8th gen, we all know that it's not as superior as PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, but it also have it's unique, and that is the exclusivity. What can you tell me about that? Everybody
knows that a Nintendo coded game that's made first party by them is usually going to be gold. It's usually just going to be golden. People are going to buy a Nintendo console just because of the craftsmanship and the quality and the history that these characters have, that they have so many major top-selling award-winning hits behind them. People will buy Nintendo just for that.
That's their biggest strong point right now, that they not only are they the creator of the hardware, but they make the most software titles for it, and they have the widest variety of IPs that I've seen.
Yeah, and it's because it's Nintendo This is an advantage I always think in my head when people ask me something similar is because it's first party, they know the hardware better than anybody else. So they're going to be able to execute it better than anybody else as well. Top that with like characters that have stood the test of time, and it's gold.
Awesome. Yes. So, well, since we do not have a Microsoft fan here in this podcast, I'm going to do that little bit part of it. I'm not a fan of Microsoft, but I will tell the audience a little bit because I've been reading and I've been watching some documentaries about the Xbox lately, and it was just basically something after Sega Dreamcast died, and Microsoft and Windows decided to make their own console in 2000, in the 2000, and it was released in 2001. And they're the Xbox original, was the actual competition, the sixth gen, which there was the GameCube, PlayStation 2. The Dreamcast was in there, but it was like fading away, and the Xbox original. Um, so, in terms of that kind of hardware, I could see the difference between the Xbox and the PlayStation 2, how the game looked. And I'm like, wow, the Xbox did have something particular, something different from the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube. And as for Microsoft and their history of making software and hardware at the same time, it was like, for me, why would they do a console if they do PCs or they do hardwares, and why they do this? That was always my question of Microsoft. But in other side, Xbox had their coolest things. The Xbox 360 came out. It had a lot of cool games in it. And in terms of, competing with the competition and also with its own competition with it, which is the PC, because PC back then, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, that the games used to run better on consoles. But that's preferences from we PCs in 2005 6. You need to like waste a lot of money on really hardware, and your computer cannot be that outdated, and you need to keep your PC up. And back then, PCs were kind of like really hard to build unless you have the budget to build your own back in the days. So the consoles were the things that make gamers easy to play. So in the Xbox had a lot of library of video games, and that is what I like about the Xbox, and of course Microsoft. So in terms of gameplay and the the actual controller and the actual facility that it gave you with the Xbox 360, it was fine. But it also had their controversies of the ring of death. It heats up really quick and whatnot. And I remember that Shinja here did have problems with this 360 like 5 times in a row.
It was
And
horrible.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've burned through two as well.
And here in Puerto Rico, the fixing facility and the fixing the Xbox 360, and it was tedious. It was like they would check it, and they were like, oh, we need to charge you like $50 for checking it, and we fix it for $100 more. So
Jeez.
Yeah. It so back then the Xbox they needed to make updates for to improve their consoles. They had to make a lot of changes.
They had to release two extra versions, didn't they?
Yes, yes, they have to, and we quite seeing that today, and I quite it's bothering me a lot because all three companies that we mentioned right now, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, are kind of like changing their minds, and it's extremely early to just like rush things because we only been like 3 years with the eighth gen, and right now the Xbox, I mean Microsoft is trying to like uh let's let's not uh push the Xbox One aside, but let's make it more PC with our exclusives more to the PC, the Nintendo with the NX, and the PlayStation 4 with the PlayStation 4.5. And it quite bothers me when it comes to this point when the companies realize that they the consoles were not up to date when they released. I mean, 1080p was so last gen. I mean, like TVs today are 4K, uh, and they run more than 60 frames per second, and these consoles can't handle that, and that quite bothers me because it's like uh this could be the most shortest generation of consoles that we're going to live, and they're going to rush to the PlayStation 5 or the PlayStation 1 point what the hell it will be, and the Nintendo NX. So before I continue, I want to ask you guys, what do you guys think about this generation, and how long it would like what would you think it would last, because of PC is ruling the gaming industry, or the gaming community, and the games and whatnot. What can you guys tell me as gamers?
Well, all of these consoles have come out relatively recently, and
Hmm.
usually the span life or lifespan of an average console way back was around 5 years. Uh, Certain consoles were like the what is it, the exception. Um, like I feel like the SNES came out relatively quickly after the NES. I'm not entirely sure about that.
Well, you're spot on with 5 year cycle. Still,
Yeah,
it's close.
it's pretty much there. Um, but uh, technology doubles. It used to be every 10 years, and now it's getting shorter.
Yeah.
Um, so I wouldn't be surprised if every gaming company pulled a move kind of like Apple and every other phone making company, where they
Yeah.
release a new model of their
Every
product
year.
every year.
Oh, I
Yeah.
hate that so much.
Um, and you
I
can't,
hate that.
like, you can sort of understand it with these products because it still has the same operating system.
Yeah.
The developers will just release a new one, a new application or game or whatever, and it'll keep working on the new device because it's still the same operating system. They don't have to really, you know, do much work or change a lot. But with games per se, that's completely different. Having a new console every so often, like you'd have to be switching constantly. Like the coding for each of your games,
Yeah.
just so it works for each new console,
Mhm.
and it would get to a point where they'd obviously start dropping older systems quickly. That's why older systems get dropped, because they can't, it's too expensive to make the same game for, let's say, someone for some reason wants what's the first game like Splatoon on the NES. They're not gonna do that because they can't run the graphics or anything on it, but it would also be too expensive, and it's just not possible at all.
Yeah.
But I would say that these consoles still have a few years left, especially since their library is not that big. Usually, it's when people get tired of the huge library they have. That's the point where, they start considering releasing a new one. But that doesn't mean they don't already start working on another console. Like, right as soon as they released the PS3, I think they were already working on the PS4, if I'm right.
Yeah.
Research and development can take a really long time.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a... Yeah, it doesn't take that long to make a new console, but they know when to release it, and so they're probably holding out on a lot of stuff. And so when we hear stuff about the NX or the PS4 and a half or anything else Microsoft is doing, which I don't know what they're doing, I'm not too surprised to hear about these things, but I don't see them coming out for another few years or so. And also, a lot of these are rumors that haven't been confirmed by anyone. Like PS4 and a half, Sony hasn't said anything about that. Developers have been talking about it, and but there has been no official word.
Yeah.
So we don't even know if it is going to be a new console or not.
Of course.
Or a brick that sits beside it.
Yeah.
Which is another thing I've seen.
Yeah.
See, just my opinion on 4.5, real quick. Yeah, it's easy for me to dismiss rumors. Really, it is for me to dismiss them. But oh man, there's one thing that just itches at me with this 4.5 thing is with the spotlight on VR and the specs that I see that it takes for the person to be able to power an Oculus or a Vive with the PC that they have. I can see why some people would want to argue that the PlayStation 4 potentially isn't powerful enough to power a VR headset at all.
Yeah.
In their case, their own headset, the Morpheus. So then when people were speculating and rumoring about an addition that adds more power to the PS4 to connect with it to be able to power something like that. And I'm like, oh, that'd be ridiculous. And then I hear this rumor too. So I gotta say, for rumors, this one does get under my skin a little bit. In that sense. If you guys followed me, okay. I don't know if I made sense, but...
So, in the terms of this generation and its competition, that it's actually the PC, that it's kind of like, the most powerful thing that gamers will experience today. And we are experiencing these changes over and over because it's like you said, Shinja, it's like a new Samsung Galaxy S, it's like a new iPhone, and it scares me because I know that there won't be a PlayStation 6 between like a year or so, because that's not gonna happen.
Well, it shouldn't happen. But...
It shouldn't, because it's a huge thing. It's something that you should be considering to the consumer, that if you buy this console, that it should last like at least 5 years or more. Right? It's like a home entertainment. It's like a DVD player. It's like a DVD player or a Blu-ray player is obsolete all of a sudden, and then you have to buy another thing. But like, Even Blu-rays are getting obsolete because everyone is it's live streaming or downloading from the cloud.
Everyone's
It
going completely digital, basically.
yes, exactly the point. So it the the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One are they are stable in their finance. I know Sony, the company, is not doing so well, but the actual console is. It's doing just fine. It doesn't need no reinforcements in money. So the thing is that there's sometimes that I can see that they're rushing too much. As well, been telling you guys all this podcast that um we're wasting a lot of money on something that okay, they're gonna say this, and I know Nintendo is doing this, and it's like going back to the Dreamcast that the Sega Saturn is not our future, but the Dreamcast is. And what happened to the Dreamcast? It's like, wow, this is going back to the 1998, and we all know that time changes, and but time did change, and technology is advancing way too fast. And if these consoles can't keep up to date, it's gonna be a problem for us gamers that like these type of consoles through history, because we've been with a PlayStation from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 4, or the Xbox original to Xbox One, to the NES, to the Wii U. Uh, it all comes back to the history. And if we look back, the mistake that all these companies did make back in the days, it's like it's kind of repeating itself. Uh, it's dangerous. It's dangerous because it's like what are you guys doing? Why are you making these type of decisions? It's like we're giving you our money. So what's up? Why can't you just make a game that we want? Or because just like we talk about games in the previous podcast, that even games are having problems, companies are having problems being so limited with the consoles, and with PC it's just there's no limit to develop a game. And that is why uh, today's generation is lacking a lot of stuff, that they keep up upgrading or doing new consoles. And it's just, for me, is, man, I would like to spend my money on your product, but I just can't because you guys are updating a new console. You're moving on, and you just can't let me play, or you just can't let me spend money on that console or spend time with it. And that happens with the PlayStation 4.5, which is like it has a 4K. And what's bugging me is that if they do make this PlayStation 4 more powerful than the previous PlayStation 4, they're gonna have a problem. Because it's like, oh yeah, those with the PlayStation 4 original, you can't play these kinds of games that has 4K, and that will
Mm-hmm.
be a totally turnaround, and it's gonna drop the consumers off from these kinds of things. And I know these decisions are like making these are type of decisions that they make in groups and making teams. Like if if you're not if you do not agree, then fuck it. We yeah, it's like we live in a world that we just go with our opinion, and let's just go with it and try it, and let's see how it is. And they end up failing it. And that is what we've been experiencing and living through all these past 3 years with the eighth generation. So what can you guys tell me about what I've been telling you guys, that uh more that the PlayStation 4.5 is doing these type of decisions and making it more powerful than the other. What do you guys think about that?
Well, to me, it just seems it doesn't seem reasonable or
No.
possible to me that just to add 4K, because this is the only thing people are talking about. Really that it's going to add 4K to the PlayStation 4. I don't think that justifies making an entirely new system, entirely new, quote unquote, to replace the old one. I mean, it's possible. Nintendo did a similar thing with the 3DS, releasing the new Nintendo 3DS, that it had better 3D graphics in it. And what else did it do? It added the C-stick.
It had better head tracking for your. It had better head tracking for the 3D, and yeah, it added the C-stick
and the two extra bumpers. Right?
Yes, and it added the ZL and ZR. But behind that is just like any other standard device with just better hardware, just a bit better hardware under the hood, and the battery life.
Yeah. So I mean, it wasn't a huge change, but it basically is a new console, because there are exclusive games for it. Like first one that comes to mind is the Xenoblade.
Yes, that's the only exclusive it has.
Yeah. So if it's anything like, if the PS4 and a half is real and stuff like that happens, then I don't see a lot of games coming out for it. And if a lot do, they're probably gonna have the option to turn it off anyway. Like they're probably gonna have a graphics option, which I've been wanting in many games for a while.
Yeah, sure.
Because sometimes they run smoother at a lower resolution, and they probably run great on your console. But
I could see a big texture pack download.
Yeah, so I mean that may be a possibility that Sony just opens up to their developers and to consumers everywhere. But it still just doesn't seem reasonable enough just for that to create a new console, especially so early in the console's life. What I do see happening is probably another PlayStation Slim. And they technically already did it for Europe, and it's out in Europe. It's not out in America yet. I don't know when it's going to be out in America. They might do it, or they might have an even slimmer version, like they always do. Like, we saw how slim the PS3 got, and that was humongous when it started out.
Yeah.
So they could probably do the same for a PS4. Don't know how long that take.
Yeah.
But.
Well, I agree with the ridiculousness Shinja, especially in the aspect of the burden that puts on any developer of any shape and size, because gamers out there get really, really mad when they expect something to be 1080p.
Yes.
And it's 720p, which is then upscaled to 1080. It's like, not only they cheat on this, but it doesn't run at 60 frames a second. Games from the beginning of time have been running at 60 frames a second, and it's stuck at 30. And huge blockbuster titles like Halo get dumped all over because they're running at 30 frames a second, and because of hardware limitations, they can't have the legendary, split-screen multiplayer anymore for that reason, to be able to run the hardware behind it. So it's already hard enough for developers these days to have some of their games even running at 60 frames a second. In some case, full-on console releases not even running properly and having frame drops, and that's completely unacceptable to a console person. Completely unacceptable to have frame drops in that regard. So yeah, I forget what point I was trying to make.
It's just going to be very taxing on developers.
It's already hard for developers anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, if they can barely handle 1080, because a lot of developers either some will do this, like a lot of PS3 games were only 720p, and they still looked beautiful. But I remember people would get mad because it's like, oh, it's 1080. And it's like, well, it's just because you got to understand there's a lot going on the screen, and there's a lot of hardware limitations.
For our listeners, know that 4K is similar to how it sounds. It's like I said, if some developers are struggling to get 1080 at 60 frames a second, 4K is 4 times 1080.
Yeah.
Plus your 60 frames a second. It's 4 times that.
Not only that, like, not enough people actually have 4K TVs to justify.
Oh yes, of course.
Like actually doing it. Like 1080p TVs are just starting to become common.
Yeah.
But to be able to enjoy 4K at its fullest experience, you need a
4K
right?
TV.
Yeah, but not only that, you need a big enough TV, which Dan just said is 55
It's 55 inches. For those of you that don't know, for you to be able to fully experience like 1080p for what it gives you, you need to be at 32 inches.
Yeah, like
or more. And 4K is 55 for you to even notice.
Like normally, you'd only be able to enjoy 4K at the movie theaters because you'd have a big ass screen.
That's right.
And then it was like, oh, you could do it at your home, and it's like what? But you still need a pretty big TV. It's like a lot of people want 1080p on small screens, and it's like, well, you're not going to really notice the difference. It's probably even going to look worse at that size. So 720 is good enough for most screens, really. 60 frames. That is nice looking though.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest,
and for gamers, that makes it feel more responsive, which it is.
Yeah, it is. But I won't complain, like, because it's only certain games that you would really want 60 frames.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it all depends on the games.
Yeah, like not every game do I want, the extra 30 frames. So
sure, it's always gonna look nice, but.
Yeah, it's always good. You're like, you can tell the difference anytime when you see a comparison video. It just looks way smoother. But
it's enough for people to get mad over.
Yeah, people are spoiled.
Yeah. So there's something that we've been talking about history earlier in the podcast, that I just remember that the Sega CD. I don't know why it just came in mind, but I just thought about the Sega CD for a moment, and it was like this competition between Nintendo and the Sega, because Nintendo, I think it released the Nintendo 64, and there was this Sega, I think it was the Genesis, and it had a lot of upgrades. It had a lot of shit in it. Like, why the Sega CD when you can do another console? Like, back in the days, you would say like, well, so Nintendo did a new console, PlayStation started a new console, and there were a lot of 5th gen consoles back then, because there was like a Panasonic one, there was a Mac one, there was actually a Neo Geo one. There was a lot of competition in the 5th gen, and there was this revolution of who would, like, it's like if Sony could and if Sega could make a console, then us other company can make a console. And so they did, but they weren't successful. So my point is here that even though they upgrade consoles to look better, it all depends on the time that they release. Because I think the Super Nintendo, which is we became before the Nintendo 64. I think it was a difference of 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, maybe less. I think it was I think 4. Between those years, the Nintendo went like, let's do the Nintendo another Nintendo console, and the Sega was like, well, what should we do? The Sega was run by idiots, so they just invented. They
Still
just
are.
invented
Still are.
that they still are. They still run
We
by
still
idiots.
love them, but they're still run by
Yes,
idiots. Yeah.
yes.
Still love
So
them.
so they're like so the Sega CD didn't work, and they just made the Saturn. So the Saturn, and we're just gonna compare it to today's developers, and we don't have this problem, but it's kind of similar because the Sega Saturn back in the days for developers was really complicated to make games in that console because of the hardware and the complex how the way it readed the disc. And they just like, well, Sony has this console, and it's going to introduce more to the CD era, to the disc era, but the Sega Saturn just didn't do the great job. And comparing it today, it's like developers are limited, and they just go into other type of things that it won't make them limited because now they have a PC. Let's just put it that way, and other consoles that are powerful, and they're just like, well, let's just not be limited and just let's release this game for this console or just only for PC, or it all depends where my money is or if I'm gonna get paid for an exclusive. And back in the days, I'm just trying to compare here. If you guys are following, it's like it's the developers. It's how they see the stuff. It's how they see the hardware. From where are they going to project the game to sell the game also, because the Sega Saturn wasn't a bad console. It just didn't quite uh it's just what it was way too superior, not superior. It was too under. How do you say that? Um, it's not underrated.
Was it just rushed? Is that what you're trying to
It
say?
was kind of rushed in a way, and they just say that Sega Saturn is not our future. Like, first of all, the first thing is they just like there was the Sega Saturn, the fifth gen, but they didn't just they didn't care about the console. They just wanted to go to the future with the Dreamcast, and it didn't go so well. And it's like fu- the history, it's repeating itself in terms of the companies and whatever whoever is running them is like, well, let's make this new thing, let's make the other thing because this is the future of this company, and we're gonna make more exclusive this time, and it is gonna be powerful than the 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 last generation, and they just end up being uh outdated with the PC. And like I'm mentioning the PC way too much is because is that back then PC was like, okay, you play games on PC. Like console were the big things back in the days.
That's right.
And now it's just a turn. It was like, wow, what the hell just happened? Like we all know that the seventh gen was the most durable generation in the history of consoles, that even people still love those consoles like 360, Wii, the original Wii, and the PlayStation 3. And we have a lot of memories with it, just like the PlayStation 2 and the sixth generation and whatnot. But it's like putting them putting us in a way to like think, well, it's throughout history we've been with the console, and now it's like, man, I do love consoles, but the PC is calling me, and PC has the most best hardware in it. And like there is this debate, there is this, but it's sometimes undisputable when the games look a lot better on PC. But of course, you need a lot of things to upgrade from the PC, and we talked about that in the previous podcast, the PC versus the consoles. But it's like the developers today, maybe talking more to the companies, is that don't repeat themselves. Don't repeat yourself, because you're going to end up in a great black hole, and it's like really hard to get out of that hole. Like today, Nintendo, even I'm gonna state this, even in the mobile, because even Nintendo in the mobile, like the 3DS or the DS, it's still competing with smartphones. It's still competing with the Vita.
Yeah,
It's still
that's
competing
true.
with a lot of shit.
That makes me sad. That's competing with smartphones.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah, it's like wow. And today Nintendo is like still doing games for the DS, and it's like that is a hard competition right there, because right now people are just like they having phones, they having smartphones, and they have everything in there. Not like a 3DS that's only for pictures, a little bit of video, and games. But in a smartphone, you could download the app, and that's easy. You can it's it's a pretty easy thing to buy games and whatnot, and Nintendo today it's still selling well with the mobile, and that is quite the good thing that Nintendo is doing through all these years. I mean, like Nintendo's portable consoles are the most epic thing that they made. From the first start, from the Game Boy to now the DS, because yeah, I know Sony. Oh my goodness, I know the Vita is good and the PSP is good, but what the hell? They're just killing it. It's just freaking killing the poor console.
It's just, to be honest, Japan gets the best handheld
Best
titles.
Yes.
Really, like
It's
it
the
wasn't
best.
until, yeah. I mean, what killed the PSP was that it was just so easy to hack. Like,
Oh, pirate games, yes.
yeah, I only bought like 2 actual games for the PSP, and then I hacked it, and I hacked all my PSPs. There was only one PSP that I couldn't hack, and I think it's hackable now.
Uh-huh.
And I got all my games that way, and so that's what killed it. It went through the same thing that Dreamcast went through, where it was a great console and it did great things, but you could just pirate games on it easily. So why would you go out and buy the game?
Mhm.
And so, but the PS Vita is doing a much better job, but developers aren't really making as many games as they could be making games on it. Like they had a really good, they had a good amount of release titles, and a lot of them were really good. But since then, not many developers have been making games for it. So yeah, that's that. I do prefer it, my Vita sometimes over my 3DS for certain games, just because it's got trophies and
Mhm.
just a bigger screen in general.
Awesome.
So
So what about you, Officer Dan? Any last words?
Um. Yeah. 4K, we're not ready. Don't please not. Don't do that.
my body's not ready. I've only
No.
done 63
Yeah,
push-ups.
you got a point. You got a point.
I don't think. Yeah, it's the install base of like 4K TVs. You think you want it, but you don't.
Where was it that I heard that? It was Blizzard talking about World of Warcraft.
Yeah, that's what I got that from. Yeah. And as far as I feel like I should say a little bit about PC too, because I'm just thinking of developers. Like, that's the easiest way for a developer to get their stuff
Yeah.
out there, is through PC. The development tools and the cost and the delivery mechanism surely is just miles more convenient and easier for them to roll out fixes and things like that.
It's like I really hope in the future that the consoles really take the lead over the PC, but that is way too much to say and handle in these type of situation and history, because it's like putting your console and upgrading it just like a PC. It will just be like a PC. So what's the point?
Yeah.
Well, the way Sony is going was making their device being able to connect to anything and everything. I think we're heading in a good direction with them towards that. And Microsoft trying to make the Xbone basically a computer, because that's what they're basically. That's my prediction for the Xbox. It's gonna eventually run the next Windows, and it's gonna be a computer, but $500 or so.
Yep.
So I don't think Nintendo's gonna go in that direction. Compared to the two, I think they're going in a completely different direction than everyone else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see the development of gaming in general for the next few years.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I just also want to specify that I hate that phrase. You think you want it, but you don't. You can't tell somebody that. Of course they want it. I just don't like that phrase.
Well, but it was condescending the way they said it too.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what
I think it's largely a condescending phrase, really.
Yeah,
I hate that.
If you don't know what we're talking about, so Blizzard, they made the game World of Warcraft, very popular game. So many people are subscribed to it. As you know, it's had many expansions throughout the year, and some people don't like the latest expansion, and you can't simply just re-roll back to older versions of the game where none of the expansion existed or some of the other stuff existed, unless you're very specific. It lets you make very specific servers for it, which is not really possible to do legally or completely legally nowadays. Anyway, people just have been asking Blizzard for old World of Warcraft servers that will run older versions, or the game just like as it was before, but maybe with a few updates here and there. And so they got asked that question at one of their conferences, and someone said, someone asked them that, and one of the representatives there said no. They just said no, and then they continued, "You think you want it, but you don't." So.
I hate that phrase. It's got to be really extreme. It's like, "Mommy, I want to eat this stuff in that box. It's got a picture of a dead mouse on it." It's like, "No, sweetie, that's rat poison. You think you want it, but you don't." Like that.
I mean, in that case, it's okay. It's like, because he does want it, but you shouldn't have it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But in other cases, it's not. So whatever. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Zyber Station. This has been Shinja.
Hey, everybody, this is Officer Dan. Guess what? Me and Shinja have a gameplay channel called Karibukai Play, where we're playing stuff and uploading videos all the dang time. And lately, we've also been live streaming some Super Mario Maker. We're taking viewer submissions to levels, so be sure to stop by and come say hi sometime.
Once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys later.